Welcome to Relation Tales. Please like this video and subscribe Relation Tales that we're grateful for each and every one of you. Let us know where in the world you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Let's begin. The rain poured down in relentless sheets as Simon Harrington stepped through the front door, shaking droplets from his umbrella. The house was eerily silent, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. He glanced around. Usually, Marissa would be bustling about, greeting him with her infectious energy and a kiss that made the long hours at work worthwhile. But tonight, something was off. "Sweetheart," Simon called out, his voice steady despite the unease prickling at the back of his neck. "In here." Marissa's voice came from the kitchen, too bright, too forced. He caught the faint rustle of movement, like someone quickly setting things in order. Simon entered to find her standing at the counter, stirring a pot of sauce with a little too much enthusiasm. She turned to him with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her cheeks were flushed, her movements jittery. "Hi, honey," she said, leaning in to kiss him. Her lips brushed his cheek, fleeting and mechanical. Simon's brow furrowed. "Everything okay?" "Of course," she chirped, her voice unnaturally high. "Dinner's almost ready. Go relax." He didn't move. Instead, he studied her, the way her gaze flitted to the floor, avoiding his. The unease grew stronger, gnawing at his gut like a dog with a bone. He'd been married to Marissa for over 4 years, long enough to know when something was wrong. As they sat down to dinner, Simon tried to push the tension aside. He told her about a tricky client at work, but she only nodded distractedly, her eyes darting toward her phone resting face down on the counter. "Mar," Simon said, his tone sharper than he intended. She flinched slightly, looking up at him. "What's going on?" Marissa hesitated, her fork hovering midair. Then, with a deep breath, she put it down and folded her hands on the table. "We need to talk." The words hung in the air like an ominous cloud. Simon leaned back, his pulse quickening. "All right, I'm listening. I need you to promise me something first," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Promise you'll listen without reacting." Like we learned in counseling, Simon felt the walls close in around him. He hadn't thought about those sessions in years. Back when their passionate arguments had led them to seek help, the counselor had taught them to pause and reflect before responding. It had been a useful tool, but the sudden mention of it now sent alarms ringing in his mind. "Okay," he said, his voice tight. "I'll listen." Marissa reached across the table and took his hand, her fingers trembling. "Simon, I love you. You're my everything. That hasn't changed, and it never will." "But—" Simon's heart plummeted. "But what?" She bit her lip, looking down. "I've been feeling restless. About us. About our sex life." Simon blinked, unsure he'd heard her correctly. "Restless? I want us to be closer," she continued, her words tumbling out in a rush. "I want to feel more connected to you, more open. And I think the only way to do that is for me to explore, to experiment." The word hit him like a physical blow. "What the hell does that mean?" he demanded, his voice rising despite himself. "Simon, please," she said, tears pooling in her eyes. "I've been talking with Sherry and Susie, and they've made me realize how much I've been holding back. I don't want an affair. I don't want to lose you. But I know that if I could just have a little freedom, just casual experiences, I'd be able to bring that energy back to us." Simon stared at her, his chest tight with disbelief. "You're asking for permission to sleep with other men?" "It's not like that," she insisted, though her voice wavered. "It's not about them. It's about us. About me being a better wife for you." Simon pushed back from the table, standing abruptly. "You want to screw around and call it self-improvement?" "Simon, please. Just think about it," she begged. "I love you. I want this to work, for us to work." He said nothing, his mind reeling. Without a word, he turned and left the room, retreating to his study where he sank into the leather chair, staring blankly at the bookshelf. His hands shook as he clenched and unclenched them, trying to process what she'd just said. The study, once a place of solace, now felt suffocating. Simon's thoughts raced, each one sharper and more painful than the last. The woman he loved, the woman he'd vowed to protect and cherish, had just shattered the foundation of their marriage. He stared at the mahogany desk in front of him, his breathing shallow. The details of Marissa's confession replayed in his mind, each word twisting the knife deeper into his chest. Freedom, casual experiences, better for us? He wanted to laugh at the absurdity, but the sound that escaped his lips was more of a growl. How long had this been brewing? And why now? Simon wasn't blind. He'd noticed changes in Marissa over the past year. Her new job at the real estate firm had brought new friends into her life. Women who, from what little he'd seen, thrived on gossip, drama, and questionable decisions. Marissa's weekly happy hours with them had started innocently enough, but lately they seemed to dominate her schedule. He thought of Sherry, the loudest and most opinionated of the group. She was divorced twice and wore her failed marriages like badges of honor. Then there was Susie, who flirted shamelessly with every man she met, married or not. These were the women advising his wife on their marriage? Simon clenched his fists. He needed answers, real answers, not the sanitized version Marissa had just fed him. He wasn't about to sit idly by while his life unraveled. The next morning, Simon left for work early, though sleep had eluded him. His mind was already working overtime on a plan. By lunchtime, he was sitting across from Rodney, his college buddy and a trusted confidant. Rodney was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a no-nonsense demeanor. As a security consultant, he was a master of uncovering secrets, a skill Simon now desperately needed. "So, you're saying she's already considering this exploration thing?" Rodney asked, leaning back in his chair. "I don't think she's just considering it," Simon said bitterly. "She's too far along. This isn't some passing thought. It's a script, rehearsed and polished. And I need to know how far it's gone." Rodney nodded, his expression grave. "All right, you're thinking surveillance?" Simon hesitated, then nodded. "I need to know the truth. All of it." By the time he returned home that evening, Rodney's team was already at work. Simon had handed over his house keys and access to Marissa's car. Microphones were discreetly installed in every room, a recorder hidden beneath the driver's seat of her vehicle, and even a tap on the landline. It felt invasive, wrong even, but Simon justified it with a single thought. She broke the rules first. The following day, Simon retrieved the first recordings from the basement recorder. He sat in his car during lunch, headphones on, his heart pounding. The first few hours were mundane. Marissa humming as she cleaned, calls to clients about listings, and idle chatter with Sherry. But then came the call that made his blood run cold. "Did you tell him?" Sherry's voice crackled through the recording. "Kind of," Marissa replied hesitantly. "Kind of? Mar, you've been talking about this for weeks. Either you're in or you're out. I told him about wanting to experiment. He didn't react well." "Of course he didn't," Sherry scoffed. "Men are territorial. But trust me, once you get started, he'll come around. Rowan's already asking when he'll see you again." Simon's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Rowan, you think he's mad?" Marissa asked, her voice uncertain. "No," Sherry said dismissively. "He's a guy. He'll get over it. Meanwhile, you have to stop worrying and start enjoying yourself. Life's too short to be stuck with boring sex." The recording ended, but Simon's rage did not. That evening, Simon returned home with a plan. He greeted Marissa with a smile, kissed her on the cheek, and acted as if everything was fine. "Did you have a good day?" he asked, pouring himself a glass of wine. "Busy," she said, avoiding his gaze. He watched her carefully, noting every fidget, every nervous glance. She had no idea he knew. "Listen," Simon said after dinner, his tone light. "I've been thinking about what you said the other night. I'm not ready to talk yet, but I appreciate your honesty." Marissa's relief was palpable. She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Thank you, Simon. That means so much." Inside, Simon was seething. She wasn't honest. Not even close. The days that followed were a blur of carefully staged normalcy. Simon maintained his role as the attentive, slightly distant husband while silently collecting more recordings and data. Each night, as Marissa slept soundly beside him, he stayed up late in his study, sifting through the damning evidence. It was on the fourth day that he discovered the tipping point, a recording from Marissa's car. "So, when are you seeing Rowan again?" Susie's playful tone came through the speakers. "Tomorrow night," Marissa admitted, her voice low. Simon felt his chest tighten. Tomorrow night. Girl, you're living the dream, Susie continued. I told you, once you loosen up, there's no going back. You'll be thanking us for this forever. Marissa laughed softly. Yeah, maybe. I just need to keep Simon from finding out. He's sensitive about this stuff. Susie's laugh was sharp. Sensitive? That's one way to put it. Look, you're doing this for you. If he can't handle it, that's his problem. The recording ended, leaving Simon staring blankly at the screen in front of him. Sensitive? The word echoed in his mind, fueling his anger. The woman who had sworn fidelity and love had reduced his boundaries to a personality flaw. He closed his laptop and sat back in his chair, his heart pounding. He wasn't going to confront her, at least not yet. No, he had a better idea. That evening, Simon returned home with a bouquet of Marissa's favorite flowers. She looked surprised when he handed them to her, her face lighting up in a way that almost made him falter. What's this for? She asked, holding the flowers close. Just thinking about how much I love you, Simon said smoothly. Marissa's eyes glistened. Oh, Simon, I know things have been tense, but I really appreciate this. She leaned in to kiss him, and he responded, playing the part of the devoted husband. Listen, he said as they settled into the living room after dinner. I've been thinking about what you said, the experimenting. Marissa froze, her expression wary. And I'm not against it. Her eyes widened. You're not? No, Simon said, keeping his tone even. I just want us to set some ground rules. If we're going to do this, it has to be equal. Both of us exploring, not just you. The hesitation on her face was all the confirmation Simon needed. I mean, she began, fumbling for words. I guess that makes sense. I hadn't thought about it like that. Take your time, Simon said with a reassuring smile. We don't need to rush into anything. I just want us to be on the same page. Marissa nodded slowly, visibly relieved. She leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. Thank you for being so understanding. Simon kissed the top of her head, his anger simmering just below the surface. The next day, Simon's plan began to take shape. He wasn't content with merely confronting Marissa. He wanted her to feel the weight of her betrayal. To do that, he needed to dismantle her carefully curated facade. Step one was Rowan. Simon spent the afternoon digging into Rowan's life. It wasn't difficult. Rodney's connections made sure of that. Rowan, it turned out, was a low-level finance manager with a reputation for chasing married women. By evening, Simon had everything he needed: a dossier on Rowan's workplace, his social media accounts, and even his home address. Step two was the friends. Simon knew Sherry and Susie were instrumental in pushing Marissa down this path. He planned to make sure they paid their share of the price. That Friday night, Simon suggested they host a dinner party. Just us and your friends, he said, feigning enthusiasm. Marissa hesitated. Are you sure? You've always said you don't like Sherry and Susie. I want to make an effort, Simon replied, smiling. Besides, it'll be nice to get to know them better. Marissa beamed. That's so sweet of you, Simon. I'll call them now. As she left the room, Simon's smile faded. The dinner party was a carefully orchestrated event. Simon played the gracious host, pouring wine and laughing at jokes that grated on his nerves. He observed Sherry and Susie with calculated precision, noting their condescending remarks and sly glances. Midway through the evening, Simon steered the conversation toward relationships. So Sherry, he said, refilling her glass, I hear you're quite the expert on marriage advice. Marissa's been telling me all about your tips. Sherry's eyes sparkled mischievously. Well, someone has to spice things up, right? Susie chimed in. Life's too short for boring marriages. Simon chuckled, though his grip on the wine bottle tightened. Interesting philosophy. I suppose it's worked well for you too. Marissa shot him a warning glance, but he ignored it. It's just fun, Simon, Sherry said, waving her hand dismissively. You shouldn't take it so seriously. Oh, don't worry, Simon said, his smile sharp. I'm taking notes. The dinner party ended late, with Sherry and Susie leaving in high spirits, no doubt convinced they'd won Simon over. Marissa seemed relieved too, leaning into him as they tidied up. See, she said, her voice soft. This was good. They like you. Simon smiled, masking the storm brewing inside. I like them too, he said, his tone light. It's nice to understand your world a little better. Marissa smiled back, kissing him on the cheek. Thank you for doing this. It means a lot. Simon nodded, his jaw tightening as she turned away. The next day, Simon put the next phase of his plan into action. While Marissa was out showing properties, he called Rodney. Everything's ready, Simon said. Good, Rodney replied. You're sure about this? Simon exhaled deeply. They deserve what's coming. All of them. Rodney didn't argue. He'd seen the recordings, heard the conversations. If Simon's plan was ruthless, it was also justified. The following Wednesday, Simon made his move. He parked his car a block away from Rowan's office and walked in with the confidence of a man who belonged there. At the front desk, he introduced himself to the receptionist. Hi, I'm here to see Rowan Daniels. I'm an old friend. The receptionist smiled and dialed a number. Moments later, Rowan appeared, his polished appearance doing little to hide the smirk Simon had seen in the recordings. Can I help you? Rowan asked, his tone wary. Yes, you can, Simon said, his voice calm. I'm Simon Harrington, Marissa's husband. Rowan's smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of panic. We need to talk, Simon continued, stepping closer. Now. Rowan led him into a small conference room, closing the door behind them. Look, I didn't know she was married, Rowan began, but Simon cut him off with a sharp laugh. Don't insult my intelligence. I know exactly who you are, Rowan, and I know exactly what you've been doing with my wife. Rowan's face turned pale. I'm not here to negotiate, Simon said, his voice low and steady. You're going to end whatever this is with Marissa, and you're going to disappear from her life completely. No calls, no messages, nothing. If you don't, I'll make sure your boss, your coworkers, and everyone in your professional circle knows the kind of man you are. Rowan opened his mouth to protest, but Simon leaned in, his eyes cold. Do you think your company would like to know you've been screwing married clients? Because I've got proof. Rowan swallowed hard, his shoulders sagging. Fine. It's over. Simon nodded, a small, satisfied smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Good. Stay out of my way, Rowan. As Simon left the office, he felt a flicker of satisfaction. But this was just the beginning. Over the next week, Simon executed the most critical part of his plan. Using the recordings and data he'd collected, he crafted an anonymous package and sent it to Sherry's husband. The man had been oblivious to his wife's extracurricular activities, but the proof Simon provided was undeniable. The fallout was immediate. Sherry's marriage imploded, and the ensuing drama caused a rift among the friend group. Susie, who prided herself on discretion, was horrified to find herself under scrutiny as well. Marissa was caught in the middle, her once tight-knit circle crumbling around her. What's going on with Sherry and Susie? Simon asked one evening, feigning innocence as he read the paper. Marissa sighed, running a hand through her hair. It's a mess. Sherry's husband found out about something, and now she's in trouble. And Susie's just being paranoid. She thinks someone's out to get her. Simon hummed noncommittally. That's too bad. Marissa glanced at him, suspicion flickering in her eyes. You wouldn't know anything about this, would you? Simon looked up, his expression calm. Why would I? It's not like I'm involved in their lives. Marissa studied him for a moment, then shook her head. You're right. Forget I asked. Simon returned to his paper, hiding the smirk threatening to break through. Simon waited for the perfect moment to confront Marissa directly. It came on a quiet Sunday evening. She was in the living room, scrolling through her phone, when Simon walked in, a folder in hand. Marissa, he said, his voice steady. She looked up, her smile faltering when she saw his expression. What's wrong? Simon tossed the folder onto the coffee table. Open it. Marissa hesitated, then picked up the folder. As she flipped through the pages, printouts of text messages, photos of Rowan, and transcripts of her recorded conversations. Her face went pale. Simon, I can explain. Don't bother, he said coldly. I know everything. The lies, the cheating, all of it. Tears welled up in her eyes. I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought. You thought you could get away with it, Simon interrupted. You thought I'd sit here clueless while you tore our marriage apart. Marissa sobbed, dropping the folder onto the table. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. Please, Simon, I love you. Simon's laugh was harsh. Love? You don't even know what that means. If you did, you wouldn't have done this. She reached for him, but he stepped back. It's over, Marissa. You can pack your things and leave. I've already spoken to a lawyer. Her sobs grew louder, but Simon felt nothing. The woman he'd loved was gone, replaced by a stranger who had betrayed him in the worst way. Marissa's cries echoed through the house as Simon walked out of the room, his heart heavy but resolute. He didn't look back. The folder filled with proof was all she needed to understand how thoroughly she'd destroyed his trust, and how far he'd gone to protect himself. He didn't sleep that night. The weight of his decision pressed down on him, but it also brought a strange sense of clarity. The love he once had for Marissa was buried under the rubble of betrayal, irreparable. The next morning, she was gone. Her car was missing from the driveway, and the master bedroom was half empty. Simon stared at the vacant space where her things used to be and felt no sadness, only relief. The weeks following Marissa's departure were quiet. The house, once filled with her laughter and presence, felt like a shell, but Simon found comfort in the silence. He focused on work, throwing himself into projects and late nights at the office. His colleagues noticed the change. He was sharper, more driven, but they didn't ask questions. Rodney checked in regularly, offering a sounding board for Simon's frustrations and plans. "You did the right thing," Rodney said one evening over beers. "She didn't deserve you, man. She blew it." Simon nodded, though part of him still wrestled with the lingering pain. His revenge had been meticulous, calculated, and devastating. Sherry's divorce became public knowledge, spreading like wildfire through Marissa's circle of friends. Susie distanced herself, terrified that she might be the next target. Rowan had disappeared entirely, avoiding any potential fallout. But Simon wasn't vindictive by nature. He didn't revel in their downfall. His satisfaction came from the justice of it, from the knowledge that Marissa had to face the consequences of her choices. Months passed, and the divorce was finalized without much drama. Marissa didn't contest the settlement. She seemed to understand that she'd lost all leverage, and Simon wasn't interested in dragging things out. For a while, Simon lived a simple life. He focused on his health, joining a gym and rediscovering hobbies he'd abandoned during his marriage. He took up hiking, reconnecting with nature, and finding solace in the stillness of the outdoors. He also reflected on what he wanted from life, journaling nightly to untangle the emotions still lingering from the betrayal. And then, life threw him an unexpected surprise. It was a quiet Wednesday evening when Rodney invited Simon to dinner. "Just a casual thing," Rodney said. "Allison's cousin Denise is in town, and we thought you two might hit it off." Simon was skeptical, but agreed. Denise was nothing like Marissa. Where Marissa had been polished and reserved, Denise was warm and genuine, her laughter lighting up the room. She was strikingly beautiful but unpretentious, her easygoing nature immediately putting Simon at ease. Over dinner, they bonded over shared interests, books, hiking, and an appreciation for the simple joys of life. Simon found himself smiling more than he had in months, his walls slowly crumbling in her presence. By the end of the evening, Simon realized he hadn't thought about Marissa once. Simon and Denise's relationship blossomed over the next year. She brought a lightness to his life that he hadn't known he needed. They traveled together, explored new restaurants, and spent quiet evenings curled up with books and wine. For the first time in years, Simon felt whole. Denise wasn't just a new chapter. She was a new beginning. She taught him that love could be kind and uncomplicated, built on trust and mutual respect. Marissa reached out once about a year after the divorce. The email was short, apologetic, and filled with regret. Simon read it carefully, then closed his laptop without responding. He didn't need closure from her. He'd already found it within himself. As for Marissa, he wished her no ill will. She was a part of his past, a lesson he'd learned the hard way. Simon and Denise married 2 years after they met. It was a small, intimate ceremony, with Rodney as his best man and Allison as Denise's matron of honor. Their life together was quiet but fulfilling, filled with love, laughter, and mutual respect. Simon often marveled at how far he'd come, from the betrayal that nearly broke him to the happiness he now held. Marissa became a distant memory, a shadow of a life that no longer belonged to him. As Simon watched Denise play with their two young children in the backyard one sunny afternoon, he realized he was exactly where he was meant to be. The storm had passed, and the future was bright.